Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Golly, it's Houselights. And this time around, we are continuing with our exploration of House of Reiner, Rob Reiner's movies of the 1980s. I am John Mills, here to take you on a tour with two of my friends on a viewing of Stand By Me, the 1980s classic film that is about the rite of passage of four boys on the search for a dead body, surprisingly based on a novella by Stephen King. Who would have figured these things would come together like that? And the two gentlemen I referred to earlier, my two friends, my dear friends, are Darren Moser, Dr. Sci-Fi himself, and the insane Robin, Tristan Riddell. Now, gentlemen, I would like to just start this show by saying two things. One, that we would really appreciate people going to Apple podcasts and giving us a rating and review. That would be really great. And the other thing is that
we can't find our pennies. We need your reviews.
While I consider you both friends, I don't believe that I would ever walk anywhere to search for a dead body with the two of you. So my first question, putting it out there, is Tristan, does that mean I'm not really your friend? Or is that sort of a silly thing to ask?
No, I think it proves that you are a real friend, because if you asked me to do that as a test, I would say, who do you think you're talking to? I get tired on Fridays. Let's call again at the end of the weekend and see if we still want to do this. No, you're a true friend. It's like when somebody asks you to go camping, I say, don't you care about me? Why would you ask me that?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, because camping like our forebears makes no sense, because if our forebears had access to the technology that we do, they wouldn't choose to camp either. So, Darren, do you fall into the body exploration camp, or would you just call the cops?
I mean, it reminds me of in Back to the Future 3, you run for fun? Like, yeah, no, why would we do that? I'm a little more enjoying the outdoors, but just none of them had a compass, guys. Like, that feels like a thing you would need. Like, they're really lucky they didn't get lost in those woods. Like, really lucky.
Like, that's even if it was just like a Cracker Jack ring,
just anything,
anything,
a flashlight, even like they had bupkis.
I would imagine,
but they had a gun.
Well, I mean, they did come into play on the
flashlight. They didn't have a flashlight. They didn't have a compass, but by golly, they had a gun.
Stephen King story.
They also did not have food. They also did not have food.
I mean, they had children chosen food. So, I mean, not real food.
Yeah, that's but we are actually exploring a movie that can be viewed as contentious. I know that some people don't love this movie. I know that I grew up in the era where this movie was one of those movies that was like, it was like Grease. It didn't really matter whether you liked it or not. Everybody watched it, especially on home video. And a friend would see it, and they wouldn't have you go find a dead body, but they would show you this movie about people looking for a dead body. And it was just a thing that happened. But Darren, this is your first viewing. You shared that before we started recording. So my first question to kick things off is we talked about This Is Spinal Tap. Then we talked about The Sure Thing, and we said that felt more like the first movie. When you look at Stand By Me, do you see the director of This Is Spinal Tap, or do you see the director of The Sure Thing?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I was going to start off with saying I'm getting directing quality whiplash, because it feels like we're up, we're down, we're up, we're forward and back and side to side. And because if you gave me just the slice of these last three films for Rob Reiner, I'd be like, what is going on? Because we get Spinal Tap, we get we all kind of agreed that The Sure Thing was like, yeah, just what was that? But this movie, it's like, and then he went to film school and learned how to do a good film. And then you get this. Now, granted, I do feel that part of this movie is probably one of those lightning in a bottle, like you had the right cast, like that's like 80% of your formula. You got out of their way. I mean, you're directing kids, which on its own is really difficult, could easily go sideways. But yeah, it's really hard to compare these three because I mean, you have the John Cusack connection, I guess. But no, I feel like it's almost like three different stabs at the target, three
Mhm.
different arrows, and they're all kind of hitting the target. But if you asked me what caused them to hit the target in different ways, that's a more difficult question. One we'll answer here on House Lights.
Well, I think the first thing to address is you talk about directing whiplash. I think that the one thing that definitely stands out, and Tristan, I'd love to get your take on this, is I think that the visual quality, at least, of Reiner's movies very much depends on his cinematographer because this time around, he has the director of photography from The Breakfast Club, which, regardless of what you think of the rest of the movie, is shot pretty darn well. And you have this, which I agree with Darren is a marked improvement from The Sure Thing.
You said The Sure Thing was a TV movie, like as
Yeah.
far as composition and
Hmm.
quality, and it felt like it.
Lighting.
This feels like a movie. Like it is a
Hmm.
beautiful. It's all outdoors. It's a gorgeous movie just from the get-go.
Yeah, that's the thing about this is that like being outdoors really helps you with your lighting scenario. I mean, like obviously you still have to know what you're doing. You still have to, flag certain things and position things and everything like that. But it definitely makes it easier to light cinematically when you're outdoors, when you have that giant sunbeam in the sky. But even at night, like at nighttime, like with the campfire scenes and when during the lookout scenes and everything like that, like it was shot. And when Will Wheaton was in his brother's room, the nostalgia that they felt, like the sun coming into the room,
Hmm.
it felt very old and remembered and lived in at the same time. It was perfect. It was perfect. And you could feel the memories even before they showed the flashback. Like you could feel that someone had lived in this room and that Wheaton was remembering his brother. And yeah, this was far and away different from, I mean, Spinal Tap is Spinal Tap. It's a mockumentary. It's supposed to look that way.
Now,
But
see,
The Sure Thing, this is far and away from how The Sure Thing looked.
what's interesting though is there were moments where I felt like some of the sensibility of This Is Spinal Tap crept back in, where some of the camera movements felt a little more documentarian than the sort of typical locked off. Not across the board, but there were certain shots where it felt like it was Reiner maybe communicating that he wanted to get back to that more uh, everybody abuses the hell out of this term, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. The handheld feel, that sort of more spontaneous shot,
A little
that
looser.
sort of spontaneous energy that you can get. There were a couple of moments where it felt like that, where that came across, not consistently though. So,
Well, I'll agree with you, Tristan. Like the two things you mentioned are so important. One, I love the fact that I could see at the nighttime shot. Like I just took it for granted because nowadays so many nighttime shots has got to feel like the dead of night, no moon, and the candle is all that you have. Like, no, I just want to see. I want to see what's going on. It could be dark. It could be, and I never felt like I forgot what it was like back in the 80s and 90s when we made nighttime shots and we just didn't care about the pseudo realism of darkness. It's okay. Uh, so I love that, and I
Fincher's coming to
love
your house right now to beat you up. Quick,
okay,
quick.
okay.
he's yeah.
I
You
don't
hear
I
that
don't care.
sound? It's
I
yeah.
don't even care. But also, like you mentioned, because I hadn't really thought too much about the flashback shots, but you know, flashback shots can also be tricky. You have to, you don't want to smear a ton of Vaseline on the lens and be like, "Ooh, it's a transition effect." But yeah, how do you shoot it just off enough that that this isn't just another scene and like why is his brother not in the next shot? Like actually the effect of the flashback is an art that we probably don't
Mhm.
give enough credit to. and I think he does beautifully with this. And again, everything you're saying is great, Tristan, on the fact that even before the flashback, when we know that that's his brother's room, like before he even opens the door, the way he approaches it, and at the end of the scene, the way his dad's like, "Okay, you found it, like get out of here," it that's a great, you know, it's an interesting juxtaposition of that shot, which I think worked really, really well. And I know it's not a flashback, I know it's a different, but it makes me think of in The Sandlot, the first time that Smalls goes into his dad's office, and I get like zero connection that this is a special room. It just feels like a room that has baseball stuff, and there's no magic of his father in it. Versus this one, I feel like there's history and there's, that glow like you were talking about. I don't know why I just was thinking of another, walking into a room that's supposed to have some sort of connection and be special. So good
Yeah.
job. Good job, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, it's Thomas Del Ruth, and just as, a passing comment, he was also the director of photography on a charmingly weird horror movie called Motel Hell, which starred, former cowboy legend Rory Calhoun in his elder years, and an unknown John Ratzenberger is one of the victims. So, if you would like to see something else that was photographed by Thomas Del Ruth, go to 1980s Motel Hell. But the photography is one thing, but I would say that this is another film of Reiner's where the cast is even more integral than anything, because I would say if you look at this script, there's nothing particularly special about it. And if it were not for the performances of the four main players and one in particular, I would argue that this film doesn't find the footing that it does with so many people, because this is a movie that has, mid 90s approval by both critics and audiences on Rotten Tomatoes. Tristan, do you think that it's the strength of the story and the photography and everything else working together, or do you think it's the power of these four child actors that really carry the film?
I think it's definitely the actors. I mean, this is a well-crafted film from a technical standpoint. I think it's well edited. Uh, well, I should say it's well edited from shot to shot. Uh, and it has good music. It has a great mise en scene, and it's fantastically laid out to the point where whether you lived through that era or not, I mean, none of us did, but you feel like you could, like even if you grew up in a big city with millions of people, you feel like you could have grown up in that place. You could have grown up in Castle Rock, and uh, but the actors definitely. I mean, every single one of the actors are fantastic. There's a reason why all of these actors continued acting for a while, and because they're phenomenal in what they do. But I think more so than the performances, more so than the technical qualities, I think it's really just the ability that Reiner and company putting putting being 12 in front of the lens. I think that's really what it is that made it so popular, is that like they didn't shy away from the gross crap that 12-year-olds say, and how immature they are, and how intense their emotions can be, where they can be crying one moment and then elated in the next. All of this was laid out, and I think these are positives as well as negatives for the film. But I think the nostalgia of being that young, at least from someone who looks like me and grew up like me, has, I think it connected with a lot of people on a multi-generational level.
Yeah. Darren, do you feel that this is a real world that you're looking at? Do you feel that this is something that could have actually happened, or does this feel too contrived?
No, I think the brilliance of the story is that it's hauntingly simple. It's not like, oh, I get a lot of Goonies comparison vibes, which is a film I recently showed my kids, and which obviously is a comedy, versus this is not a comedy. This is a drama, but it isn't like, oh, we got to save the town from the prospector who's back at, like, no, it's just, we want to go look. We heard there's a cool thing over there. We want to go check it out. And like, that's life, is that simple of just, and then, so you have this really simple framework, the finding of the body, and you, but then, like Tristan was saying, those moments where the boys are being really honest with each other and talking about, they're all talking about their dads and their home lives and how terrible they are, and about moving on through grades, and they're not all in the same class, so they're not going to see each other all the time. And it, I don't feel like, from my experience, I don't think everybody has a super tight group of friends from that age on, especially boys. Like, if that happens to you, you're really lucky. Like, I have, can count on one hand, the number of guys that I still remotely keep in contact with from high school onward, let alone, at that. Now, that can happen. You can have like a lifelong friend that really connects with you in elementary, or middle school, but it doesn't happen all the time. But no, but the performances were amazing. I was really impressed.
Yeah, and one that I want to, call to special attention, because it is a pain. I actually think it's a very painful thing to watch a movie like Stand by Me when you see the raw talent that somebody like River Phoenix had at such a young age, and to
Yeah.
think that it's so awful to boil down somebody's life to what they could contribute to a specific field, but at the same time, when you see what was on track to become an absolutely legendary talent, whether it's River Phoenix, whether it's Heath Ledger, whether it's, there are a couple of football players I can think of where they were cut down very young, and you think to yourself, my goodness, if they had just made it just to their old age, what a thing would have been. But Tristan, does that happen with you when you look and when you see River Phoenix's performance? Is there any sort of pang? Because I would argue that as strong as the cast is from top to bottom in this film, it's River Phoenix that gives it that nudge that pushes it forward. His performance as Chris, I think, is very necessary, since Chris's death as an adult is the inciting reason for the telling of this story.
Well, I think Rob Reiner was right to put River Phoenix as Chris instead of Gordy, because he originally auditioned for Gordy, and I think a lot of probably a lot of kids did, thinking that, oh, Gordy's going to be the focal point, and Gordy is the protagonist, but Chris is the emotional bedrock of the piece, and kind of the inciting incident. His death is used as the framing device that pushes um the writer to write the story. And I think I don't necessarily I don't feel a pang anymore, when I
Mm.
see River Phoenix. I mean, like, I have that thought of, like, man, we only have so many performances, like, we have a handful of performances, and so many of them are stellar. um because I think I've seen every one of his movies. I'm used to seeing that face and thinking, man, that's a damn shame. So it's I can't say that I dwell on it, but it doesn't enhance or take away the feeling when I watch this movie.
No, that's
If that
fair.
answers your question.
No, that's fair. And Darren, to flip over, because we're all Star Trek fans of varying degrees. Seeing Will Wheaton in this role, do you
Yeah.
see in his performance as Gordy something that would have given a casting agent the reason to say, we've got a new Star Trek series coming? That's the kid I want as Wesley. Do you see something special enough in his performance that it makes sense why his career took a certain trajectory?
Yeah, I think so. It's so weird because I feel it feels almost reversed, where I mean, I love his performance in Stand by Me, And it feels like, by comparison, in Star Trek The Next Generation, I know he's older, and a little bit of a different person because of, life and all of that. But it feels like he was given nothing in Star Trek. Like,
Hmm.
like he had the chops. I don't, I know people like to rag on Wesley and all of that. And I feel totally the downfall of the character, not the actor. The character is what the writers put into it. Like, I think if they had gone found what they really wanted him to be and been on the more dramatic side, be the stressed out teen who is like, of course I got to excel. My mother's like the head of Starfleet Medical, and I'm on a starship. Like, look at the pressure. Now, obviously, that's not Star Trek, and that's because that's conflict, which makes good story writing. So it just, I almost feel like, man, you wasted him. You had this good actor, and you wasted him with, you know, playing with isolinear chips and wonderkin stories and stuff like that. Look at this dramatic actor you had. Look at this guy who can say more in silence than many actors can say with a whole page of dialogue.
Tristan, do you think that, because I took a little passive shot at the script earlier, do you think that, to Darren's point, because we've seen Will Wheaton in a role where the writers obviously didn't know what to do with somebody who was not an adult, they didn't know how to write for it. Am I too hard on the script? Is this a script that knows how to write for children, or do you think that this is more a director who gets the performances necessary out of basically looks at the script and says, okay, this is how I'm going to get those kids to give me what I need for the film?
Well, I think it's definitely a symbiotic relationship because I feel like you can't really have one without the other. And we've seen other child um, centered pictures, or stories written by Stephen King. And we know that sometimes he can write for children, sometimes he can't. Sometimes he gets super weird and in an odd direction. I think that the star of that is Reiner. I think from reading all the behind the scenes and the biography stuff and the anniversary stuff and director's commentaries, I mean, like cast commentaries and everything like that, it really shines a light on how much Rob Reiner put into this picture and into the preparation, into the production and the post production. And he really kind of mentored these kids, treated them like kids, but at the same time as professionals. Like I should say, he treated them like adults, but allowed them to be kids at the same time, if that makes sense. And I think he trusted them to do what they needed to do. And so I really think Reiner brought out these performances. I mean, you got to have that base of the script. I personally don't like the script. I think it's lazy. I think it's too bare bones. Um, but I feel like the directing and the acting make up for the lack of story.
I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times through the years, because I am the old man of the show, I felt very much on an island about this movie in some of the criticisms that I've had. And I'll borrow a line from a mutual friend of ours, a fellow nerd partier, Mike Schindler, when he was talking about a different movie with me, where I was asking him, should I go see it? He said, sure, but it's not really about anything. And I would say that's the core issue here, is that I'm not sure what this movie is about. It's an event, but there's no moment here that I can hang my hat on and say, this is talking about a seminal moment of awakening for kids in general, that I can hold on to and say, yeah, I remember that moment where I realized X, Y, or Z about life. I think it tries to get there, but I don't think it quite gets there. And I think that where the movie is saved is in the four leads, as well as Kiefer Sutherland, and the antagonists are fantastic, and Reiner's ability to get what he needs from them. But I don't think he's done any favors by the script. And I could see very easily one or two different casting choices, and this is a movie that everybody says, yeah, it's okay,
Yeah, could have been great.
instead of loving it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I often will talk about the scenes where you could definitely tell that the actor or actor group was let loose to improv. We talked about it with Peter Sellers and in some movies that really doesn't work. I felt I felt like in at least in this viewing, and that might change on subsequent viewings. I felt like you had a really strong script, not in the overall plot. Like I agree with you guys, but I'm saying as far as the boys, like each boy was very fleshed out. Like they knew this is this boy, this is this boy. Like they're not the same kid. They're not just different slices of the same thing. And I felt like the improv, because I'm sure there was to a degree some, was it felt polished, which is weird because it's improv and you get flexibility, and I feel like that lends itself to the boys because they're acting obviously, but they are able to improv in a way that just rides the line and feels I never got pulled out and felt like, oh, well, the fire scene, where they're all around the fireplace, that's obviously they're just joking around. Like, yeah, they are joking around, but I felt the bar for improv was pretty solid throughout the entire movie. Again, on first viewing, but I felt like that's a testament to these child actors because they were acting the whole time, I felt. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
You mentioned the campfire scene, and I have a very distinct problem with vomit humor, typically. I remember when I was forced to watch Pitch Perfect, which is a god awful movie, and there was a scene involving vomit in that. If you haven't seen it, folks, don't watch it. Not worth it. And I almost got ill watching it. But this vomit scene seems to play really well with a lot of people, and it's the scene where Gordy is telling the story about the castor oil and the pie eating contest and everything, and people puking on each other. Tristan, I don't have as much of a problem with this vomit scene as I do with typical vomit scenes, and I'm going to say the word vomit as many
I
times
was
as
gonna
possible in
say,
this show.
geez, get a
I
counter up.
I want to say vomit, puke, hurl, spew, however you want to say it.
I remember like you and I were watching The Righteous Gemstones at the same time. And
Yes.
I texted you. I was just like, wasn't that episode amazing? Oh my God. That was a hilarious episode. And you're like, I didn't like it. I'm like, what are you talking about? That was one of the best episodes they ever made. You're like, in the first scene they had people vomiting and I didn't like it.
Psychoanalyze me here. Why does this vomit scene play okay with me when so many other vomit scenes do
Well,
not?
it's hyper realized. It's
so
fake.
cartoony. It's
Yeah.
so
Okay.
fake.
It's
so
literally the
colors.
turning sideways, and we know there's a hose right next to his
Right.
mouth, and it's pie purple.
Yes, that and the thing is, I think that is the thing. I think that's why the vomit scene crosses the line for so many people like myself, is because it's like watching a Family Guy vomit scene where it's so
is.
absurd that
Who
you
wants
laugh
chow?
at. Yeah, it's just saying that line out loud. Peter, call an ambulance. Oh my God.
I don't wanna.
Sorry. If you haven't seen that scene, folks, do yourself a favor. Family Guy vomit castor oil. Anyway, so okay. So I accept that though, because it's very technicolor. It's very obviously a fantasy sort of scene. But one thing that I think plays odd, Darren, is the presence of the gun. And I'm not trying to get into any controversial territory this way or that, but I would argue actually that the presence of the gun is unnecessary to this story. And in fact, the ending would be improved if Chris's standoff with Kiefer Sutherland's Ace was simply to say, "You're not going to do it." And Ace stands down and says, "You're not worth it." And that becomes a moment where we say that's why later in life, Chris sort of uses the same gambit, and that's why he winds up losing, because that's what happens is he tries to break up an argument. and he comes to harm as a result. And we could see an inciting incident from his childhood where he called that bluff and it worked, and so he operated under the false presumption that it would work again. Do you agree with me on that, or do you think that the gun is necessary to all the stuff that happens here?
I mean, I see what you're saying, and I don't think, at least at what is presented, there's enough of the future time to really even pay off on that. It's all audio. It's him just writing his story. Like, we don't see the standoff. Um, Personally, I felt the scene worked as it was, where because very tense scene. Because I'm kind of almost thinking like, okay, like like does he shoot him? Like maybe not fatally, but he is like you. That I mean, it's a masterfully acted scene. Will Wheaton is like dead eyes staring him down,
Yeah,
and
he
I'm
had
like,
that quiet intensity
yeah.
that
And then he
I wanted
cocks
to
the
mention
gun.
earlier. Yeah, like that's the thing, is like that moment right there, that quiet intensity, that ferocity underneath. You could just feel all that pain underneath coming out, but he's trying to keep it down. And
Yeah.
you're just like yeah, where was Wesley? In that, like why couldn't we access that? Like that's immediately the moment that I was thinking of.
So I feel the scene works. Honestly, I wouldn't buy Ace, Kiefer Sutherland, backing down just from anything the boys had said. He's been so presented as
Mhm.
the I do what I want. I I'm backed with my homies. Like yeah, the gun in that moment to me represented the power of adulthood that the boys don't have. They aren't bigger, they aren't stronger, they have words, but so does the gang. The gun was the leveler of the playing field because it was the only thing that gave Ace pause. So I just honestly, he could have given the best speech ever, and don't think I would have bought it. I would have been like, why don't you just like why is this
Well,
bully backing down?
but let me turn that on its head then, that he gives the
Okay.
best speech ever, and it still plays out as an echo of what goes wrong in the future, and his brother, Eyeball, winds up being the one that stops things from happening. And
Okay.
so he's given, the idea that if he speaks words that are right, one of the people
Or
will
I'll
stop
or
it
I'll
from
combine
happening.
it. What if we did this? I mean, because I don't know why we're rewriting the scene, but what if
No,
he gives
you know.
the speech, but Gordy is like 5 paces behind him with the gun? He doesn't see that Gordy has the gun, but Ace does. And we've seen this kind of thing play out in many
Mm.
movies where,
Mm-hmm.
so from Chris's perspective, he's like, oh my gosh, my words stopped him. But what really stopped him was the gun that Gordy had aimed at his head, at Ace's head the entire time. So and because he's, and for some reason Chris doesn't realize that, and it's never revealed. So that leads to your thought, John, of in the future then he thinks, oh, I still have this, I can talk someone out of a situation, but Gordy isn't there with a gun backing him up unbeknownst. uh I
Well,
mean,
okay,
it's a bit to rewrite. Like, I don't necessarily say it's a better scene. It
Oh,
just kind of
I'm not
fits.
but I feel
I'm
like
not trying to rewrite, but Tristan.
you guys are kind of robbing Gordy of a fantastic moment there.
Yeah, I don't want to change
Okay,
the scene. I'm
fair.
just I'm just I'm
I
just
think
listening to
I'm
John.
throwing it
no,
out
no,
there.
like I get it. Like John, I totally get that instinct to remove the gun. And um, as a bleeding heart liberal, that was my first instinct too. But at the same time, though, it kind of made me laugh a little bit, because when they introduced the gun, like when I first watched it, when they introduced the gun, I was just like, oh, it's like a literal Chekhov's gun. Okay, so we're gonna see this later on. And but when that happened, I was like, so is the message here that all you need to get rid of bullies is a loaded gun? And it made me think of um American Dad quote, where his son goes up to him and says like, hey dad, like, can you teach me how to defend myself? Like, can I take up karate? And he's like, there's one thing you got to know. And he pulls out his gun. He's like, gun beats karate every time.
Which actually is an echo of the movie Black Belt Jones from the 1970s, where somebody says, "You're no match for my gun foo." So, you know.
Or in not Dawn of the Dead, the George Clooney, Tarantino, Robert
Oh,
Rodriguez,
from Dusk Till Dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn, when he says he pulls out his gun, he's like, "I got 6 little friends and they all run faster than you." Yeah,
Something
anyway.
like that.
Yeah, it's just I I I wish there was more of a message of you can stand up to bullies, you can have that intense moment, you can move forward, you can be the person you are, and you can, right the wrongs without a gun. I very much would prefer that message. But I very much like the moment that Gordy has, where like both, because you have Chris who stands up to him, because Chris is the one who says, like, no, this is not happening. Like, you can tell, you can see the fear in his eyes, but he's like, no, I'm taking a stand. Even if I get hurt from this, I'm taking a stand. And so he has that moment. Then Gordy comes in and has his moment of that quiet intensity. But I wish there was a way we could have both, but I don't know at this moment how we
I
could.
just, I just, I think that it speaks to my desire to have. It has nothing to do with the gun itself for me. It has everything to do with. I just, I just search for something in this movie to give it a. The reason he's telling this story is because something in it he feels tells us what went wrong when Chris tried to stop those people. Like, in a sense, you see that Chris is actually a good person. You see that everybody was wrong about Chris, but it's not like we knew Chris before this story was told. And I just want to see something in it that speaks to why he would, because I I like to think the three of us are decent people, but we would size up a situation maybe a little differently, given a moment. I'm having a little bit of trouble putting it into words, but I think you kind of know what I'm going for with that, where it just maybe that's it. What I'm going for is I'm not entirely certain why this specific story would be evoked by Chris's death later in life.
And I guess I kind of ignore it just because I don't really care about the framing device. Like, yeah, it starts off with, you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Richard Dreyfuss. I didn't know you were in this movie. And then it's like, oh, he's remembering the time. And then, you have the kind of the coda at the end where he's talking about his friend. And like, I get that. And it's not bad. I could almost not even have it. Like, it's just a story, like, without any of the narration or the framing device. Like, I think it doesn't necessarily add anything that this core story is missing. Uh,
Right.
like, now
Right.
maybe if
Maybe
they,
maybe maybe that's what it is this movie works fine without the narration. And maybe that's what disconnects with me
it's like when
in
movies
this.
feel they have to change the timeline of something and like everything's all of a sudden flashbacked in like little chunks throughout, and like just show it in order. Like,
But what's
sometimes that works
interesting
better.
what's interesting is The Princess Bride, which we're barreling toward right now, is the same sort of principle of having somebody narrating a thing,
Mm.
explaining why we're hearing the story.
Well, I mean, that's literally a bedtime story, but you're
Yes,
not wrong.
but there's we'll get to it obviously, but I think it'll be very interesting to contrast how those framing devices work with relation to the main story that we're getting and what we might see from Reiner in that. But uh
Columbo was Wesley all along.
yeah, right. Obviously, with the title Stand By Me, and of course ending with the classic Benny King song, uh, and my own personal passion for movie scores and soundtracks and those sorts of things. Tristan, do you feel that this is a successful score? This is a successful use of Stand By Me? Is there anything about this score that strikes you as special or resonant with the story that it's paired with?
No, not really. Um, I know your question was probably longer than my answer, but
Yeah,
there's certain I always
it
feel like
definitely
the
was.
wrong person to ask this question to, because there's so many times when I don't notice it. Like unless the score is bombastic, or kind of a new wave or weird or unique, I don't really notice it too terribly much. I feel like so many scores kind of blend together and just fade into the background, because sometimes they just kind of have to have an emotional hit here and there. Sometimes they just kind of have to have an undercurrent that you don't really notice, and I feel like this is one of those. um like unless you're watching something like, like Annihilation with Natalie Portman that came out, where the you have this music that kind of drones and just like overtakes the scene, something like that, like, or if it's a Star Trek film. um but for no to me, this was fine. It wasn't bad, as long as I'm not thinking like, oh good lord, like this is worse than the Thomas Crown Affair. But no, I thought it was fine.
Okay, fair
I mean,
enough.
I like the fact that the main theme was used throughout, but very, very subtly. Like it was just the couple of chords, like really subtle. It wasn't until the very end where they actually go into the song, which I felt was appropriate. Like I think if every time they get nostalgic, like the whole song starts to play, that's a bit much. So I felt they did a good job with that. And obviously there's other music in the picture, but it was very subtle.
So, speaking of use and subtlety, the cursing here is a little less than subtle, and perhaps a little shocking when it comes to certain moments and the way boys talk at that age. So I have to ask the two of you, because neither one of you really were beer shotgunners when we talked about that during the sure thing. Were either one of you as foul mouthed as this when you were this age?
No, not even a little. I mean, I was an idiot, just like every 12-year-old boy. Like I said gross things, I did gross things, and I made gross jokes, and I would swear every once in a while, but it wasn't a. I don't know. I mean, I don't remember doing it that much. I think one thing that this, I got to be honest, like with this movie, that was one thing that really turned me off. Was I don't really like kids in movies. I don't. Like you guys know this about me. Like I don't like child
Well,
actors.
here's an entire movie without children in movies, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, is that I've never really I've worked with kid actors, and I can't stand kid actors, and seeing them on screen, most of, like I'd say 90% of the time, I don't like seeing kids on screen because I don't feel like they can act. Now, thankfully these kids can act, but these personalities were so off-putting. These kids were so off-putting to me, and obnoxious and uninteresting and vulgar and foul-mouthed, that I did not have a good time watching it. Like I can recognize that the performances were good, but that style of 12-year-old is annoying to me. No matter how realistic the portrayal might be, it's annoying to me. And also, I thought there was a lot of portentousness in some of these scenes, where like it felt like a Zach Braff film, where they're just like, "Oh my god, this moment of our lives is so important, and I'm going to talk really soft like this because I'm saying something important." And there was the, like, weird chemistry between Gordy and Chris, especially towards the end, where it's just like, what are they going for here? This is strange. Like they're just like, it's like these kids at the end knew they were being filmed, and so they tried to ham it up at the end and really sell the emotion. It's just, I couldn't stand these characters.
Interesting, because these characters, I can honestly say I knew variations of these people growing up. So maybe that's just
I
your
did
results
too.
may,
And
your
I didn't
mileage
like
may
those
vary.
people.
I was related to a lot of them. But as we come here to sort of the, as we're barreling toward the inevitable conclusion of our discussion, Darren, in terms of that, though, do you think that the cursing and some of the crassness is authentic, or do you think that is one of the shortcomings of the script where they too wrote for a more adult sensibility and maybe it was Reiner that reined it in and made it feel more childlike?
It's hard to say because I also was not, a person who swear a lot growing up, and it's not like kids like that didn't exist. It's just if you were in a group like that, this movie's going to hit you on a totally different level than if you weren't. Like you kind of, it's like a divide. You kind of can't, not that you can't relate, but and the fact that they're all like that, like they're all s- I guess granted before I said like they're not all the same character, they're all very different. Like, yeah, but in some ways they are all the same kind of same character. Like there's not one of them that dresses differently, like maybe wears, button up shirts or something, a little more clean cut, or one that just doesn't swear at all. Like they're all, because this is the, you know, trailing end of a author writing a book, writing which goes to a script, which goes to an actor. Like, you're downstream of all these elements trying to create this child character that is also being acted by a child. And so I don't know like how much resolution you're going to really get. And I don't say resolution as in like the plot, as in like the clarity of their performances. That's so that it's like, oh, if the kids swear, the kids swear. Like I don't, it's hard to pull that out from the actor to the character, really.
Mhm. It's interesting. It's really this is ultimately a film that is both a good adaptation, but reveals the shortcomings of some of Stephen King as a writer. Because I've read a fair number of Stephen King stories, not everything. I'm not a fanatic about it. But one of King's shortcomings is that the characters he writes are who they are because the story needs them to be that way, as opposed to feeling like they are characters who exist. And I think that there is a little bit of that in this, and it's something that the script cannot overcome. But then if you compare it to an adaptation like The Shawshank Redemption, you see what happens when a director who is of a different sort than Rob Reiner, where it can go and how much it can elevate itself because the movie becomes about something and the characters take on a different quality from the get-go. Um, Two interesting trivia tidbits that I think are worth mentioning on the way out. One, I'm going to have a question with afterward, but um, the $2.37 that the boys have to buy supplies when they pool it in December of 2021 would have had the purchasing power of $22.53. So when Will Wheaton buys all of that food with $2.37, it's important to remember that adjusted for inflation, yeah, okay, it was actually he could have bought a little more if he wanted to. Um, and I'll throw this to you first, Aaron. But apparently, Rob Reiner is an avid non-smoker, even campaigned for anti-smoking laws in California, and insisted that the cigarettes that they smoked in the movie, that these very underage kids smoked in the movie, were made from lettuce leaves instead of tobacco leaves. Would this film have suffered at all if the kids had simply not smoked as opposed to smoking cigarettes made from lettuce leaves? Do you feel that the kids smoking cigarettes is authentic to the era, or do you think that it is an affectation that could have been discarded?
Well, I mean, personally, I'm not a smoker. I don't like smoking. It grosses me out. Uh, so
I still miss it to this day, for the record.
I could have, yeah, definitely done without it. As far as it being needed, So I was trying to do some time math, my favorite kind of math, looking, because this was set in like what, 52, I think, 54, something like that.
59, I thought. I think it's 59.
So, between when the movie comes out and 59, you're talking about a little under 30 years. So when I try to think of that, I try to put myself in the context of, if there's a 90s movie, like, or an early aughts movie, and their cell phones don't look like, Nokia razors, it feels off. So to that point, I feel like it's hard for me to answer that question because I'm not in 1987 remembering 52 and did kids smoke in 52. Like, if I remember that, then yeah, it's going to feel out of place if they don't. But I can't answer that because I wasn't, around in 52. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The first cigarette I ever smoked, I was 10 years old. Tristan, what about you? Do you feel that the cigarette smoking affectation is necessary
No,
for the
not at all.
story?
Totally could get rid of it. It was distracting. I was thinking about how idiotic it is for 12-year-olds to smoke the entire time. Whenever I saw it, I was like, this is stupid. This is unnecessary. And it's, again, it's one of those realistic portrayals that I just didn't like. I think it detracted from the experience for me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it detracted it from everybody. And I mean, like, I knew idiotic 12-year-olds who smoked, and uh I think it's just there's a difference between seeing these 12-year-olds at a campfire smoking to seeing everyone in Apollo 13 in the
That's
command
true.
center smoking. Like when you see that kind of setting, you're just like, yeah, everybody smoked back then. But then when you see four kids alone in the woods, you're like, why is that needed?
Who are they trying to
Why,
impress? Each other?
yeah, yeah. What's going on? Like, are they smoking to unwind after the end of the day? Come on.
Well, I think that Jerry O'Connell's character has a silly statement at one point, and maybe it's supposed to show that they have bad parents. That, I mean, obviously they don't have the best parents in the world, but still, it's it does play. It plays as something that was grafted on so that people would say, "Oh, yeah, well, back in the 50s, things were different," as opposed to something that would be like an 17-year-old drinking in the early 80s is a decidedly different thing than a 17-year-old drinking in 1991 because the laws had changed by then. And so you have a different connotation to the action. But either way, I don't think that the smoking was necessary, and that's why I sort of fixate on it, is that as somebody who, is totally willing to, sell out this podcast to have Philip Morris sponsor us, if they can engineer something that, doesn't, kill me quickly, that would be fantastic. Please, 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 I would love something like that. But here we are. It's been almost an hour, so we're inevitably at the moment.
We
Tristan,
saved
I'm
all
going to
that
throw,
time not
you know,
going on the train track.
you know,
That hour we saved.
you know, before we do this, before we have our ratings, obviously the train track uses a couple of photographic effects, but it also uses. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think that the lighting mismatch on the blue screen that they have
It looked like
in
rear
two
projection.
shots. Yeah, it was something, whatever it was. The lighting mismatch took me completely out of the scene. When I was younger and I watched this in the 80s, totally didn't notice, was totally caught up in everything. As an adult watching this on my television, I just fixated on it and I said, "Oh, the keys are wrong on that." The two of you, did you also did that take you out, or did you stay in that moment? When
Uh,
they're running down the train tracks and the train is coming up behind them.
I didn't notice the rear projection shot. I did notice the depth of field trick of the fact that they're not actually right in front of the train, and that's
Right.
obvious. But
No,
Yeah,
I liked that shot, but no, the rear projection it kills me every single time I see it. I'm just like, there's so many ways to hide it. There were so many different ways that they could have just cut straight to it, to where they fall down, which would have been better. But yeah, I mean, like, it is what it is. I'm not going to criticize the movie too heavily, but yeah, it does take me out of it, but it's not a deal breaker for me.
So that detour handled. Uh, for our wrap up moment here, where we give our ratings, Darren, we know that this was your first viewing. Tristan, we know that this is not your favorite film of all time. So I'm very torn here as to who gives their rating first. But Tristan, I am going to toss it to you first. You've dropped many hints that this is not your favorite film of all time, that this is most likely not to get a 5-star. I am dying to know.
I mean, remember 2001? There were hints,
on a 5-star scale, where do you drop Rob Reiner's 1985 beloved classic, Stand By Me?
I actually, I'm gonna reveal something to the audience that when we talked about doing Reiner of the '80s, I said, okay, I'm bowing out of Stand By Me. I'm not I'm not talking about that film again. I don't want to watch that film again. Like, you guys can do it without me. And you said, they're like, well, just don't watch it again. Like, just don't watch it again. You can still hang out with us. And then you guys, guilted me into doing it.
Because we're pretty awesome. We're pretty great people, and we know what we're doing.
I don't like this movie at all. It's the only thing that I can think of that people like about this movie is the nostalgia of it. I think it's poorly written. I think it's paced horribly. I think it's boring as hell. I think there's no point to it. I think there's really great acting from some of these kids, but at the same time, there's a lot of overacting, and I feel like there's too many moments when I feel like Reiner is just gonna, like, walk in front of the camera, look at the audience, and say, "Isn't this dramatic, folks?" And it takes me out of it, and I don't like the kids. The vomit scene is completely unnecessary, and there's just so many scenes in this where I'm just like, why are we here? Why do I care? What's going on? And but there are certain moments that I you can't argue are iconic. Like Will Wheaton jumping over the fence, or like Corey Feldman's character breaking down after being confronted by the Junkman guy, and where they find the body. Like, everybody knows it. Like, this has influenced so many people. This has been parodied so many times. It's a part of our pop culture. But to me, this is just a very mediocre film. So, like, I think it has some great moments, but those great moments are not for do not make the rest of it forgivable. So I'm giving it a generous 2.5, calling it mediocre.
Oof. Wow. A generous 2.5 from the Insane Robin, Tristan Riddell. Darren, this is your first viewing, so we're going to save you for last. I'm going to say that I have never loved this movie in the same way that many people my age have. I do not dislike it, but I do not love it. It is a good movie with a weak script elevated by stellar performances from a couple of key people. I think that Kiefer Sutherland, even though he's getting jobs just because he's Donald Sutherland's kid, shows why he's a good actor here. 2 years later, he's going to be in The Lost Boys, which is one of my favorite 1980s curios. I think Will Wheaton is very good here. I think that River Phoenix that's the kid where, if I were an adult film critic at the time, I would say, you got to watch that guy. He's something special. River Phoenix is something special here. But the movie's not really about anything. And it's just a story to tell, which is in a lot of ways what bothers me about a lot of things I have read from Stephen King, where it's a story to tell and it is an interesting story, but it is not a necessary story. It's not something where I walk away and I'm like, I have learned something important from this. It's just entertaining. But I will wind up falling on 3.5 stars. This would be a 2.5 or a 3-star without River Phoenix. But River Phoenix and Kiefer Sutherland in particular give it a nudge. And so I wind up maybe too generously giving it a 3.5. And Darren, everybody in the audience is on the edge of their seats to know, what do you rate Stand By Me after your very first viewing?
Well, I enjoyed the film. It was, I didn't. I mean, I knew the train scene. Everybody's seen that, and I knew it was about. I didn't know it was about finding a body. I knew it was like they're going somewhere to do something. But so I was totally surprised that it was like, here's a flashback of my youth, and it's narrated, on my way to Jaws. It's like, what is going on? What's going on? But well, after Jaws. But no, I felt I would definitely watch this movie again. It's coming of age stories are really tricky because it's like, I agree with you guys where if there's more of a story to connect to, it's easier to relate. But otherwise, it's like if you didn't live in Oregon in the 50s and smoked as a kid, like what is there to connect to besides just maybe, I didn't look at any of these boys and see myself. But the performances were great. I mean, the performances that came out of these 4 boys were amazing, especially Will Wheaton. Gordy was, I mean, again, I'd heard that he was in this, but honestly, after watching it, I wish I'd watched it sooner. I wish I had not waited this long to watch this movie because was really enjoyable. Um, Gosh, just going between a couple of numbers. If only there was a way to do half stars, but alas, there's not. No, I think
No such thing. It's
no
a
such
myth.
thing.
It's a myth.
Honestly, I'm gonna give this 4 stars, 1 per boy. I really enjoyed this movie. I feel I would, like I said, I'd watch it again. Our critiques of it totally valid, yes. But as much drama is in this, it's kind of just relaxing. It's just boys walking around.
Fair enough. It is just boys walking around, and your mileage may vary.
It's a better
as a
title
result.
than Stand By Me. I heard Stand By Me
Yeah.
was the one that they came up with and couldn't think of anything better.
The
And that
runaway
kinda
hit
tells you
of
something.
1985, Boys Walking Around. There, you heard it first. And so we wind up with a film that is not universally beloved, but it is definitely more beloved than The Sure Thing. And that takes us into next week as we plunge into dangerous territory to review and rate Rob Reiner's 1987 The Princess Bride.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.